The moment I heard my daughter laugh beside the man who planned to rob me, I knew. I wasn't her father anymore. I was just a wallet with a pulse. You ever build your whole life on a code, only to watch the people closest to you break it with a smile? I'm Montgomery Pierce. Most folks call me Monty. I'm 52 years old, a former Navy intelligence officer, now the founder and CEO of Sentinel Shield, one of the top private security firms in the country. We deal with VIP protection, cyber fraud prevention, and corporate threat analysis. I've advised billionaires, testified in front of Congress, and neutralized threats on 3 continents. But the threat I never saw coming lived in my own house for 17 years. I live alone now in a sprawling stone and glass mansion on the edge of Lake Candlewood in Connecticut. It's beautiful, serene, also a monument to failure. I used to have a family here, my ex-wife Vivian, and my daughter Natalie. But that was before betrayal turned love into evidence. Vivian and I were married for 20 years. She was sharp, elegant, the kind of woman who knew how to work a room without seeming like she was trying. I thought we had a real partnership, until I discovered her affair with Boyd Kessler, a slick-talking art dealer with soft hands and hard lies. He was charming in the way that makes good men itch. I caught them. Not just the affair, but their attempts to move assets out of our joint accounts behind my back. Always the tactician, I moved faster. The divorce was swift, brutal, and quiet. I kept most of what mattered and gave Vivian enough to disappear with dignity. I wasn't vengeful. I was surgical. At the time, Natalie was 17. She took it hard. At first, she sided with me. The cheating, the lies. She was disgusted with her mother. But over time, Vivian did what she does best: manipulate the narrative. Your father was never really there for us, Nat. Always off on business. Working. Late. Boyd made me feel seen. I heard about these little poisoned conversations secondhand through mutual friends and family, but I didn't push back. I figured truth always surfaces. I was wrong. Natalie is 32 now. Smart, ambitious, polished, like her mother in some ways, but softer. She built a successful career in pharmaceutical sales and recently got engaged to a guy named Preston Redmond, a Harvard MBA, finance world darling, perfect jawline, perfect suits, perfect lies. The first time I met Preston, he shook my hand like he was testing me. His smile never reached his eyes. His answers were too smooth. I've seen that look before in the briefing rooms before a con job starts. But I said nothing. Natalie looked happy. I told myself I was projecting. Old wounds, old ghosts. Then came the lunch at Alejandro's. It was early spring. Warm breeze, polished tablecloths, the kind of place where valet drivers wear blazers and water costs $12. I hadn't seen Natalie in a couple of weeks, so when she called and asked to meet, I said yes. She walked in looking radiant. Business chic, auburn hair tucked behind one ear. Vivian's exact profile, which used to comfort me. Now it raised defenses I didn't show. We ordered. Small talk. Then she leaned in, smiled nervous. Dad, Preston and I are finally booking. The venue, she said. We've always dreamed of a magical summer wedding. The Rosewood Estate. You know it? I nodded. Of course I knew it. My firm once handled a high-profile security threat there. Beautiful grounds, tight surveillance, tight budget requirements. The thing is, she continued, fidgeting with her napkin, weddings are so expensive now, and we're saving for a house in Greenwich. There it was. You need help with the expenses, I said. She looked embarrassed, almost rehearsed. If you could help with $22,000 for the venue and catering, it would mean everything to us. I studied her. The tone, the pauses, the exact figure. I'd heard voice modulation like that in interrogation rooms. But I pushed it aside. She's my daughter, I told myself. Of course I'll help, I said. You're my only kid. The relief on her face was genuine, or at least it looked that way. She reached across the table, touched my hand. Thank you, Dad. Then came the dagger. There's one more thing, she said. Mom and Boyd want to be involved in the planning. I know it's complicated, but they're really excited. I almost laughed. It's your wedding, Natalie, I said. Not my battlefield. She smiled again, but deep down I knew I was already being outmaneuvered. What Natalie didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, Boyd's name had popped up in a fraud investigation my company was handling for a high-profile art collector. Nothing solid yet, but whispers. Where there's smoke, I find fire. Over the next month, I kept my distance. Natalie barely reached out. When she did, it was about logistics, payment schedules, receipts, no conversations, just transactions. And when I asked questions, she'd pivot. Preston's so stressed, his parents backed out of helping. The florist charges for everything now. It was like I was funding a show I wasn't invited to. Russell Blackburn, my oldest friend and COO at Sentinel Shield, picked up on my frustration. We've been through hell together. Combat, contracts, near misses, we trust each other. Something's off, I told him during one of our weekly poker nights. I feel like I'm being handled. Then trust your gut, he said, tossing in his chips. Your instincts saved my ass more than once. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, the moonlight catching framed medals and dusty family photos I never took down. If they were playing me, they'd underestimated the wrong man. I had to be sure. So I started digging, with gloves on. No illegal surveillance, just open source intel. I assigned Xavier, our best tech investigator, to monitor social media around the wedding. He's brilliant, quiet, loyal. He'd find something, if there was something to find. And what he found changed everything. But I'll get to that. For now, just know this. I gave my daughter $22,000. I thought I was paying for her happiness. Turns out I was funding a heist, with my heart as collateral. I didn't want to believe it at first. You don't want to think your own daughter could be playing you. But denial is just comfort wrapped in cowardice, and I'm not a coward. I spent 30 years navigating betrayal on foreign soil. The difference was, back then, it didn't come with your child's face. After that lunch at Alejandro's, I gave myself 3 days. 3 days to observe. 3 days to question my own bias. 3 days to try and forget the off note in Natalie's voice when she asked for money. But the pit in my stomach wasn't going anywhere. On the 4th day, I asked Xavier to start tracking what was publicly available. No hacking, no warrants. Just intelligent eyes on social media, financial chatter, event mentions. Xavier was young, brilliant, and just cynical enough to be good at what we did. 5 days later, he came into my office with a tablet and a face that said I wasn't crazy. Sir, you're going to want to see this, he said, dropping the tablet onto my desk. Photos filled the screen. Lavish dinner at Le Bernardin in Manhattan. Preston. Natalie. Vivian. Boyd. Toasting with Dom Perignon under the caption, Planning the future with those who truly matter. I wasn't invited, I wasn't mentioned, I hadn't even known they were in the city. My daughter's smile in the picture was blinding. My name was nowhere in the comment thread. Xavier hesitated before swiping to the next slide. There's more. You asked me to flag suspicious financial activity tied to Boyd and Preston. I found several transfers. He showed me bank reports. Nothing confidential. All derived from monitored accounts linked to public entities and known associates. Structured transfers. Just under reporting thresholds. About $150,000 over the last 6 months. Business? I asked. Could be, Xavier replied. But the timing overlaps with large withdrawals from a shared account between Natalie and Preston. It hit me then. This wasn't just exclusion, it was strategy. I was being used, and they were covering their tracks. I didn't rage, I didn't yell. I closed the tablet and thanked Xavier. Then I called Russell. I need eyes and ears at the rehearsal dinner, I said. Legal, subtle, and clean. He didn't even ask why. We've saved each other's lives enough times to know when a man means business. I'll do it myself, he said. We'll use a passive audio relay in the private room. No disruption. No trace. The next day, Natalie invited me to her apartment. Her tone was warm, maybe a little too warm. I brought her a small bouquet. Not because it was expected, but because I needed to remind myself what normal fathers do. Her place was modern, pristine, decorated like a lifestyle magazine spread. She welcomed me in, offered wine, then sat me down with the same pitch-perfect poise I'd trained myself to distrust. "Preston's parents can't contribute as much as we expected," she began, voice soft. "We're short for the honeymoon. It's a last-minute thing. Would you be willing to help? Maybe another 8,000? She looked tired, or maybe calculatedly tired. I watched the tremor in her fingers. The way her voice had a carefully measured vulnerability. It was the same tone I'd heard in debrief rooms after someone tried to pass off a half-truth as sincerity. "Of course," I said, smiling. "Whatever you need." She hugged me like I'd saved her from a burning building. I left that apartment with a new certainty. I was being run like a mark, but the rehearsal dinner would tell me how far they'd go. The dinner was held at the Blue Water Grill, a gorgeous riverside restaurant with private rooms and polished servers trained to pretend they didn't hear secrets. I arrived precisely on time, dressed the part of the proud, aging father in a tailored gray suit. Natalie greeted me briefly, already swept up in the whirlwind of logistics and guests. I was seated at a far table. Distant relatives, a few colleagues from Preston's office. I could hear laughter from the main table, but I couldn't hear what they were laughing about. Not until I excused myself and slipped into the service hallway where Russell waited with a wireless earpiece. "It's live," he said, handing it to me. "Audio's crystal clear." I returned to my seat, inserted the piece discreetly, and let their voices filter in through my ear. At first, it was standard wedding banter. Wine lists, hors d'oeuvres, honeymoon destinations. I almost thought I'd made a mistake. Then Preston spoke. His voice slurred just enough to let the mask slip. "Once we get that final check from your dad, that's it," he said. "The man's just an ATM. We cut him off after. I mean, come on, your mom's lover basically raised you anyway." Laughter. Soft. Cruel. Natalie giggled. "Boyd's been more of a father to me for years. At least he knows how to make a wedding investment actually worthwhile." Then Vivian. The voice I'd once trusted with my future. Montgomery was always easy to handle. Say the right words, show a little sentiment, and the wallet opens itself. More laughter. Boyd's smug tone joined in. The old soldier still thinks in straight lines, doesn't see the game swirling around him. Preston lifted his glass. "To Montgomery Pierce, the gift that keeps on giving." I sat still, not blinking, not breathing. I sipped my wine. I laughed at a joke from the insurance guy beside me. On the outside, I was unbothered. Inside, a switch flipped. The man I'd buried after the divorce, the one who used to break people. For a living, he came back, and this time he wasn't bound by diplomacy or compromise. As the dinner wound down, I approached the main table, smiled at everyone, and congratulated the happy couple. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," I said, kissing Natalie's cheek. "It'll be a day none of us ever forget." Later that night, in the silence of my study, I opened the contingency file I hadn't touched in 15 years. Inside were assets, legal frameworks, and pre-written letters I'd once drafted in case of corporate betrayal or personal threat. They were clean, professional, ruthless. I picked up the phone and made the first of 5 calls. By morning, the venue would be empty, the caterers canceled, the guests notified of a sudden emergency, the florist reimbursed. I called Florence Sullivan, the estate manager at Rosewood. She owed me a favor. "Florence," I said, "I need the property empty tomorrow, no staff, no chairs, no flowers, nothing." "But Mr. Pierce," she protested, "your daughter's wedding won't be happening, not as planned. I'll compensate everyone, just say yes." After a pause, she did. When I hung up, I looked around the room. Family photos removed years ago. Military medals tarnished by time. A life once defined by loyalty, now sharpened by betrayal. They thought I'd just keep paying, that I wouldn't fight back, that I'd walk my daughter down the aisle into a future built on lies. They forgot who I was, And worse, they forgot what I do for a living. The next day would not be a wedding. It would be a reckoning. The morning sun hit my window like a spotlight. I woke up before my alarm, dressed in a navy suit I'd reserved for funerals and federal hearings, and looked myself in the mirror. Calm eyes, steady hands, no guilt, only clarity. By now they'd be arriving at the Rosewood estate. Natalie would be stepping out of her car in her dress. Preston would be checking his cufflinks. Vivian would be doing what she always did best, performing. But there would be no stage today. No audience, no ceremony, just silence. At exactly 9:17 a.m., my phone rang. Natalie's name lit the screen. Her voice was frantic, unglued. "Dad, something terrible has happened. The venue is empty. The chairs, the flowers, the coordinator, no one's here. Everything's gone. The caterers say they were canceled, and even the photographer is missing. We don't know what to do." I waited a beat before answering. "That's concerning. Where are you right now?" "At the Rosewood. Preston is losing it. Mom's crying. Boyd's yelling at someone on the phone. Can you come? We need you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I arrived at the estate and parked just outside the circular driveway. The gate stood open like an unfinished invitation. Inside the grounds, chaos unfolded. Natalie stood in a white robe, mascara already smudged. Her wedding dress still zipped inside a garment bag hanging from the back of a folding chair. Preston paced in a tight circle, phone pressed to his ear, yelling obscenities at someone who clearly wasn't picking up. Vivian spotted me first and rushed over. "Montgomery, thank God you're here. It's a disaster. Everything's gone. I don't understand. The coordinator won't respond. This is criminal." I scanned the property. No tables, no music, no signs of a wedding. Just raw nerves and confusion. "Has anyone contacted the estate manager?" I asked. "They're not answering either." Preston snapped, his face flushed. "This is beyond unprofessional. We're going to sue them for everything." "Let me try calling Florence Sullivan," I said. "She's an old acquaintance. Might get through faster." I stepped away, pretended to make a call, then returned. A moment later. "Florence is on her way. She's offered us the main house for a private discussion while she sorts this out." That was the first lie. The second came next. "She said she's terribly sorry and insists it's all a misunderstanding." They followed me willingly, desperate for direction. Inside the estate's library, the air was cool and still, and waiting for us was Theodore Winters, my attorney. Polished suit, leather folder, quiet judgment. "Who is this?" Boyd demanded, already on edge. "This is my attorney. Given the circumstances, I thought having legal support might be wise." Natalie's face fell. Preston frowned. Vivian stiffened. They knew something was coming. "Dad, what's going on?" Natalie asked quietly. I gestured to the chairs. "Please sit. I think it's time we discuss what really happened to your wedding." "What does that mean?" Preston barked. "Do you know something about this?" I looked him directly in the eye. "I know everything. About the recordings, the transfers, the lies, about calling me an ATM, about replacing me with Boyd, about manipulating me for money to fund a wedding that was never about family, but about leverage." Vivian stood up sharply. "You were spying on us? That's a violation of—" "Spare me the outrage," I said calmly. "You lost the right to indignation 15 years ago. This wedding is canceled, not postponed. Canceled. No guests will arrive. No vendors are coming. Everyone was notified last night." Natalie's eyes widened. "You sent out cancellations?" "Yes. I cited a family emergency. Paid everyone double their contract rate for the trouble. The only ones surprised today are in this room." Preston stepped forward, aggressive. "You can't just call off a wedding. This affects more than just you." "Actually, I can, and I did. And this," I said, as Theodore opened the folder, "is what replaces the wedding ceremony today." One by one, we handed out documents. Natalie's hands shook as she read. Preston scanned furiously. Vivian scoffed. Boyd went pale. This is a termination of financial support and a notice of intent to pursue charges for attempted fraud, I explained. The $22,000 for the venue was the beginning. Then came the request for $8,000 for a honeymoon that was already prepaid by Boyd. Then $50,000 for a fake property in Greenwich, a property that, by the way, is owned by Boyd's Gallery Trust. Natalie looked like she'd been hit in the chest. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about that part. But you knew enough, I said, voice quiet now. You knew you were using me. You knew you were keeping me out. You laughed at me with them. I heard it with my own ears. Preston flung the document across the table. This is all hearsay. You can't prove anything. Theodore pressed a button on his phone and the audio began to play. Preston's voice, Natalie's giggle, Vivian's condescension, Boyd's smug arrogance, all of it, every word. They froze. That's not legal, Boyd blurted. You can't record people without consent. Normally true, I replied. But the Blue Water Grill displays signage indicating all rooms are subject to security recordings. Entering the space implies consent. It's legal. Natalie started crying. Real tears this time, not performance. Why would you do this? She whispered. Because I loved you, because I trusted you, and because actions have consequences. Theodore handed them individual follow-up documents. These outline your legal exposure and next steps. I suggest you read them carefully. The room was silent. Then Florence entered with 2 of my security team members. They'll escort you off the property when you're done, I said. This estate is no longer reserved for your use. Vivian looked at me with pure venom. You've destroyed your own daughter. No, I said firmly. She did that herself, when she chose them over me. Natalie tried one last time. Please, Dad. It wasn't all me. Preston and Boyd convinced me. I didn't mean. That's what hurts most, I interrupted. You didn't need much convincing. You chose this path with open eyes. I turned, walked out, and left them in that library of lies. In the empty great hall, I allowed myself one long breath. For years I told myself it would get better, that Natalie would come back, that Vivian would fade, that Boyd would vanish. But none of that happened, so I did the only thing left. I took away their stage, took back my power, and in doing so, I finally let go of the last illusion I had about family. From now on, I would treat truth not as an ideal but as armor. They'd fooled me for the last time. 3 days after the wedding that never happened, the silence was louder than any storm. The media hadn't picked up the story yet, but the whispers in our social circle moved faster than fact. No one really believed the cancellation was due to a family emergency. Cold feet, they said. Financial dispute. Some blamed me. Others guessed. Preston had skeletons in his closet, but none of them knew how deep the rot went. I stayed quiet. I let the rumors do their work. In the background, I had Russell and Xavier monitoring every move Preston and Boyd made. Natalie tried to call me 23 times, Vivian 5, Preston 17, Boyd not once. But his lawyer reached out twice. That silence from him said more than any voicemail ever could. He was calculating, waiting, planning his next move. I was already 2 steps ahead. The documents I had handed them weren't just legal warnings, they were weapons. Preston's outlined not only his scheme against me, but his questionable history of mismanaging client funds. That file had enough ammunition to bury his career and invite scrutiny from the SEC. Natalie's document revealed the trust fund she'd always counted on had been legally redirected to a nonprofit serving wounded veterans. She'd received nothing. Further, her current job at the pharmaceutical firm had been a favor from a CEO I'd protected during a corporate extortion case. That favor was now over. For Vivian, it was a comprehensive dossier of her manipulation campaigns, emails, voicemails, messages she'd sent to friends painting me as cold, absent, controlling. All documented, all real. And for Boyd, the most dangerous file of all. Years of evidence I'd compiled. Fraudulent art sales, forged certificates of authenticity, fake provenance papers, tax evasion, hidden accounts. At first, I'd gathered it as a precaution. Now it was leverage. I told them nothing would go public if they vanished quietly. I knew they wouldn't. That afternoon, Xavier walked into my office with a grim look. "Sir, we intercepted something you should hear." He played the audio. A phone call. Boyd's voice. Clean, sharp, speaking with someone encrypted, confirming. A Bitcoin transfer. Confirming a plan. Not a lawsuit, not a smear campaign, something worse. Montgomery Pierce, his home, within 7 days, clean, untraceable. I didn't blink. "How much?" Boyd asked. "Half now, half after." Xavier paused the recording. "He's trying to have you killed." I stood slowly. My voice was calm. "We activate Mamba protocol, full surveillance, countermeasures. I want him watched every second. And send this to Theodore, have him package the evidence for the FBI. Russell entered 10 minutes later. "You want to bring them in now?" "Not yet. We give them the rope, then we hang them with it." By nightfall, the wheels were turning. Boyd was under full electronic monitoring. Every device tracked, every phone call mirrored. Vivian's movements traced. Preston's financial activity flagged. I didn't go home that night. I stayed in the office. I poured myself a scotch and watched the monitors as Boyd made another encrypted call. Another payment confirmed. Another timestamp logged. He never saw it coming. The next morning, I made a call of my own. A number I hadn't dialed in a decade. Federal contact, former intelligence, quiet and lethal. Lighthouse Protocol Priority 1. Target Boyd Kessler. Addresses inbound. "Copy that," the voice said. "You'll have your sweep by morning." 12 hours later, the raids began. Boyd's house, his gallery, his backup office, simultaneous. No leaks, no press, just clean federal precision. I watched from my study as the news broke on local stations that evening. Arrest made. Art fraud. Federal conspiracy. Cryptocurrency laundering. No mention yet of the attempted hit. That would come later. My phone rang. Vivian. I answered. Her voice was jagged. "Did you do this?" I didn't hesitate. Boyd did. This to himself. He would never. This is absurd. The FBI has the evidence. Bitcoin transfers. Hired threats. You might want to speak to your lawyer, depending on your involvement. She was silent. "I had nothing to do with that," she finally said. "Whatever I've done, I would never go that far. For your sake, I hope that's true. Because if they find otherwise, there's nothing I can do to help you." I ended the call and stood by the window. The lake outside was perfectly still. Not a ripple, not a breeze. Strange how peace looks so similar to emptiness. My phone lit up again. Natalie. I let it ring. Then a message came. "Dad, please. I need to talk to you. I didn't know about Boyd's plan, I swear. I'm scared." I stared at the message for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Finally, I typed. "Contact Diane Halverson. She'll help you find legal representation. Do not contact me again." Then I blocked her number. That night, I finished the scotch and stood in the dark hallway of my home. For years, I had walked these floors hoping Natalie would come back to me. That she'd see the truth. That she'd choose better. But she hadn't. And now everything had changed. I wasn't her safety net. I wasn't her father. I was a man who had survived betrayal. And I was still standing. Boyd was in custody. Vivian was unraveling. Preston was quiet for now. Natalie was alone. I didn't feel victorious, I felt hollow. But somewhere inside that hollow space, something new was forming. Not revenge, not triumph. Something harder, more precise. Justice. And it wasn't done, yet. 3 days after Boyd's arrest, Xavier entered my office with a manila folder that made him hesitate at the threshold, which he never did unless the contents were personal or dangerous. I motioned for him to sit. He placed the folder on my desk and didn't speak right away. I opened it and immediately understood why. Inside were documents recovered during the raid on Boyd's gallery, including records from a private investigator. He'd hired 15 years ago. At first I assumed Boyd had investigated me back then, a way to undermine me during the affair with Vivian. But the name on the target field wasn't mine. It was Vivian's. Boyd had hired someone to dig into her past, and what they found rewrote everything I thought I knew about the woman I had once married. The report detailed a pattern of behavior, multiple affairs dating back to college, all with men of status and wealth, each relationship ending when she found a better opportunity. Boyd was never her first betrayal. He was just the one that stuck. But the final pages were what stopped my breath. DNA results. A comparison between Boyd Kessler and Natalie. I read it once, then again, and again. The numbers didn't change. The conclusion was the same. Boyd was Natalie's biological father. I leaned back slowly, as if the weight of that sentence had knocked the air from the room. I felt a cold sink into my chest, like stepping off a cliff you thought was solid ground. I stood, walked to the window, stared out at the lake, trying to gather the 32 years of memories that now felt like someone else's life. The recitals, the scraped knees, the late-night college calls, the graduation hug, all of it now twisted by this truth. Vivian knew. She had always known, and she never told me, not once, not when we married, not during the divorce, not even when she weaponized Natalie against me. And Boyd he had known too for at least 10 years. He let me raise his daughter while laughing behind my back. Control. That was the reason. Natalie was the key to both of them keeping leverage over me. Russell entered the office quietly, saw the folder open, and didn't speak. He waited until I looked at him. "What do you want to do with this?" I didn't answer for a long time. Eventually I said, "Nothing. Not yet." That evening I poured a drink and sat in the dark study trying to feel something specific, but all I felt was noise. Then the hospital called. A calm voice from Hartford Memorial said I was listed as Natalie's emergency contact. She'd been in a car accident, single vehicle, broken leg, internal bleeding, stable but serious. She'd been asking for me. I arrived 30 minutes later. The sterile smell of antiseptic hit me like a memory I didn't want. War zones and recovery wards. The doctor met me at the surgical wing. "She's out of surgery and stable. She kept saying she needed to tell you something before we put her under. She was distressed. Not just from pain." I nodded. "When can I see her?" "Give it an hour. She'll be moved to recovery." I sat in the waiting area under the glare of fluorescent lights that made everything feel more artificial. 10 minutes in, I noticed a familiar figure across the room. Diane, Halverson Preston's mother. She looked up, saw me, and came over. "Montgomery, I didn't expect you here." Neither did I. She sat down beside me. "I've been checking on Natalie. She's had no one else. Vivian cut ties after the arrest, and Boyd, well, now you know." I looked at her. She told, "You?" Pieces. Enough to understand why she was unraveling. She's been trying to rebuild. New job, therapy, volunteer work. No more contact with Vivian or Preston. "Why are you helping her?" "Because I failed with my own son. I ignored who Preston was. Maybe helping Natalie is my penance." The nurse approached. "Mr. Pierce, she's awake and asking for you." I followed her through the halls. When I stepped into the room, Natalie looked impossibly small against the sheets. Pale, wired, eyes swollen but alert. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracked and weak. "You came." "The hospital called." "I needed to tell you." She paused, catching her breath. "I found out. About Boyd. He's my biological father. I didn't know, I swear. The FBI found a test in his office. Agent Donaldson told me last week." I didn't speak. I moved a little closer. She looked terrified. "I didn't know until now. Not ever. If I had known, I would have told you. It would have changed everything." I finally said, "Would it?" She nodded slowly. "Everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "You raised me. You taught me how to ride a bike, how to swim, how to be strong. You're my real dad. You've always been." Her hand reached for mine. I hesitated, then took it. It was cold and familiar. The weight of all our years together settled into that single touch. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she whispered. "Just for you to know you were the only father who ever mattered." The monitor beeped. The nurse returned. "She needs rest." I stood to go. Natalie held on for a second longer. "One more thing," she said urgently. "Mom moved to Arizona, not to stay with her sister. She's meeting someone, a new target, wealthy tech guy. She said she finally found someone worthy." I nodded slowly. "Thank you. Please don't let her do it again." "I won't." Outside the room, Diane was waiting. "How is she?" "Alive," I said. "Recovering." She studied my face. "What now?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Finish what I started, but maybe the plan needs adjusting." I walked out into the evening air, the scent of hospital bleach fading behind me. The next time I saw Vivian, it wouldn't be as an ex-husband or the man she lied to for decades. It would be as the wall she couldn't climb. And I would make sure. The pattern ended with me. 2 weeks after Natalie's accident, I flew to Arizona with a briefcase full of truth and a calmness that felt like steel. She'd told me Vivian had moved here not to recover but to reset, to charm her way into another fortune. This time her target was Leonard Garrison, a widowed tech mogul whose company had just sold for billions. He was the kind of man Vivian had always circled like a hawk with a broken wing. I didn't blame him. If you don't know what you're looking at, Vivian seems like elegance personified. The right smile, the right compliments, the right pain, just veiled enough to seem mysterious. But I knew her game and I wasn't going to let her play it again. I set up a meeting with Leonard under the pretext of upgrading his estate's security. Sentinel Shield had recently launched a private defense program for high-profile executives, and Leonard's name was on our shortlist. When I arrived at his mansion, a sprawling Spanish-style property with red tile roofs and towering palms, he greeted me warmly. Sharp eyes, smart posture, the kind of man who made you earn his trust. Good. We sat in his glass-walled office overlooking a pool the size of a tennis court. I began the conversation naturally, asking about his current security infrastructure, where he saw vulnerabilities, how he handled digital and physical threats. 15 minutes in, the door opened. Vivian entered, with a tray of iced tea, and froze. Her eyes locked on mine. She dropped the tray. Glass and liquid exploded across the marble floor. "Montgomery," she said, her voice brittle and sharp. Leonard looked between us, confused. "You two know each other?" I kept my eyes on her. "Vivian is my ex-wife." He turned to her. "You told me you were widowed." Silence settled in the room like a fog. Vivian's lips parted, but no words came. I reached into my briefcase and placed a folder on the desk. "I apologize for the misleading nature of my visit, Mr. Garrison. I didn't come to offer you a service. I came to protect you from a predator." Vivian's face turned pale. "Don't listen to him. He's lying. This is revenge." "Actually," I said, "this is documentation, evidence, verified records, a timeline of Vivian's history of financial manipulation, patterns of behavior, the schemes she's pulled before, including what she tried to do to me and what she encouraged our daughter to do." Leonard opened the folder. Inside were printouts of court filings, screenshots of text messages, wire transfers, photographs, a copy of the FBI statement listing Vivian as a person of interest in Boyd Kessler's case. I could see his expression shift from curiosity to disgust. "Vivian," he said slowly, "did you take these things from your last husband?" "They were part of the divorce." He's twisting. "The jewelry you told me was your grandmother's was part of his mother's estate," I said. "It was meant for our daughter. She never wore it during our marriage, but kept it during the settlement, until I forced her to return it." Leonard closed the folder. "I think you should leave my property now. You have 30 minutes to collect your things. Security will assist." "Leonard, please," she begged, tears forming fast and flawless. "You don't understand. He's always hated me. He's punishing me. You lied about who you were, he said flatly. That's enough for me. I turned to go. She followed. You think this makes you righteous? You're a monster, Montgomery. You destroyed our family. I stopped at the door. You did that all by yourself, Vivian. I just turned on the lights. Back in my hotel room, I received a text from Leonard. She left with 2 suitcases and a painting she claimed was hers. Security verified. No incident. Thank you. The next morning, I flew back to Connecticut. The clouds above Phoenix were just starting to break. As we took off, I thought about Natalie in her hospital bed, about all the years I thought I understood my life. The truth had shattered everything I thought was unbreakable. But in that destruction, there was a strange kind of freedom. Back home, I received another message. This one from Diane. Natalie is being discharged tomorrow. She asked if you'll be there. My answer came quickly. I'll be there. The next day, I met Natalie outside the rehab center. She was walking with a cane, her gait uneven but strong. Her hair pulled back, her face clean and honest. You came, she said quietly. Yes. We walked to my car in silence. She got in slowly, then turned to me. I want to help. I know I don't deserve to ask, but I want to work with the foundation. Speak to people who've been manipulated. Show them how it happens. Maybe help them heal. You'll start as a consultant, I said. 6-month review. No special treatment. Fair, she said, nodding. We didn't speak much after that, but something had changed, something real. Months passed. Preston pled guilty to conspiracy and wire fraud. Boyd was denied bail. Vivian disappeared from public view. The Montgomery Pierce Foundation grew. We helped families recover assets. We educated the wealthy on emotional fraud. We didn't save everyone, but we exposed the patterns. Natalie eventually earned her place on the team. She spoke honestly. Sometimes she cried during presentations, but audiences leaned in, because nothing hits harder than a true story told with regret. One day after a speaking event, she handed me a letter. From Boyd, she said. He claims he always wanted to tell me he was my biological father. Blames Vivian for keeping it a secret. What did you do with it? Sent it to the FBI. Blocked all future contact. She paused. You're the only father I've ever had. DNA never changed that. That Thanksgiving, she invited me to a quiet dinner with Diane and her daughter. I accepted. No hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe life wasn't rebuilding what I lost, but building something new entirely. If you've made it this far, I'll leave you with this. Betrayal cuts deep. Sometimes it comes from the people you love the most. But you don't have to drown in it. You can rise. You can rebuild. Not with the same people, not with blind trust, but with truth and strength and clarity. I'm Montgomery Pierce. I lived by a code: loyalty, discipline, consequence, and now I live by one more: rebuilding. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one that reveal the cost of deception and the power of truth, subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep telling what others try to bury. I'll see you in the next story.